Hello, my name is Nguyen, and I'm presently a fellow with OCA Houston, a Vietnamese American navigating community work and organizing. Presently, I'm working on applying to social work and Asian American studies grad programs. It hopes to further this aspiration. And apart from that, I'm also a member of the Houston BTS ex-Army community. OCA Greater Houston is a volunteer-driven organization of community advocates that strives to meet the current and evolving needs of a diverse population through a comprehensive continuum of programs targeting different life stages of APIs with a focus on developing advocacy, leadership, and civic engagement participation of APIs. For Starry Night Festival, its purpose and mission is to highlight and celebrate the diversity of API artists, culture, and community, and to share the untold API experience for the Greater Houston metropolitan area through a shared API community space. Today's workshop is called Manifesting Your Manuscript, the do's and don'ts of telling your own stories, guided by KESHAV KANT, pronouns she, hers. She is a queer Indian and a neuroscience nerd turned creative consultant and editor-in-chief of Off Color Org, a nonprofit multimedia platform dedicated to empowering Black folks and non-Black POC to shape the world they live in. With a mixed STEM and arts academic background from the University of Toronto, KESHAV specializes in creative writing, media, culture, analysis, and political commentary. You can usually find her talking about sexuality, gender identity through the lens of race, anarcho-communist politics, and fine men over at MX Kant Even. And take it away, KESHAV.
Okay, I regret putting the fine men part in there, but hey y'all, it's nice to meet you. I'm KESHAV. I am a neuroscience nerd and a med student turned creative. And today I'm going to be talking about how you need to get your book published. So you got into writing because you're passionate about the craft, or you want representation for your community, whatever it could be. And you need to get it done because we need your voices out here. So we're going to talk about how we can make that happen starting now. All right. So like the title says, we're manifesting your manuscript, right? There's a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to the writing industry. More don'ts than do's, but overall it's a fairly simple process. It just takes a lot of time. So in the next slide, let's talk about how you are going to see how white the industry is. It's very white, right? And after the summer, we've all seen exactly how inclusive it can be towards people of color. The good thing is it's not staying that way. There's a lot of progress happening, especially when it comes to Asian Americans, like Asians from back on the continent, for Pacific Islanders, for indigenous folks across Pacifica and Oceania. There's a lot of progress there. And it's not just that we're getting books. There's a lot of us being employed into editorial fields, like my position with the publication I'm working with, or in boardrooms. So there is a lot of growth there. It's just a matter of where do you fit in and how quickly can we get you there? All right, so let's talk about how we're gonna go from idea to actual published book. Okay, so first things first, you gotta finish the thing. I know it's tough. I have once worked on a manuscript for about like 3 years, the bulk of which was just like Googling random things. My FBI agent was probably wondering why I was searching Dragon Evolution, but you need to finish the thing because it doesn't matter if you're a published author or if you are brand new onto the scene. If you don't have a manuscript, they don't know what to do with you because you could have a fantastic idea, you could have a great platform, a great voice, but without concrete evidence that you can complete a project, you're always going to be a risky investment. And that's what it comes down to, unfortunately. Because as much as we want to talk about representation being out there and how much we want to talk about loving reading, it being more accessible, we do unfortunately live in a world that is fairly capitalist in how we go about change. So you need to make sure that you are a worthwhile investment of their time and money before any publication, big or small, will take you on. All right, so you finished the thing. Yay. Huge achievement, by the way. A lot of people are unfortunately unable to finish their manuscripts, but if you reach this stage, I'm very proud of you, okay? You need to give yourself a pat on the back for that. Now you get to the more frustrating part of writing, all right? You need to learn how to pitch yourself. And yes, I made that little cringy graphic right there, but I've seen people actually pitch themselves like that at my work. They will just send in an email just being like, hey, I have this thing for you and I saw you were interested. Is this something you'd like? That's not going to work properly. There's an order to this because there's a lot of people who need to be signed onto your project before it can even be considered as an accepted like book in progress. All right. And that comes with things like having a query letter, having a proper introduction to your manuscript, having a completed manuscript that has like at least briefly been edited. And then there's a lot of ways you can go about doing that. The easiest of which is, let's say, if you're fortunate enough to have an agent, right? If you have an agent, your agent and your representation will usually take care of those, the outreach for you. They'll help you craft a query letter for publications. They will create a pitch deck for how they're going to sell your product to everyone else. And there are a lot of help there. Some people choose to do it on their own if they'd like to be more independent, if they want to be in more control over their own creative process. And that's a totally valid option. It just means that there's things you're going to need to do, like sending out query letters by yourself, following up on submissions by yourself. It's just a lot of legwork, right? So let's talk about how you're actually let's talk about if you even need the agent, first of all. No, you don't. Very honestly, you can do without an agent, but it does make life easier, like I said. When you think about it in the sense of like, let's take the example of like a farmer's market. You can go to a farmer's market and then farmers have their stalls, they're selling you all their like organic veggies, non-GMO this, pesticide-free that. It's great. And it's direct. There's a lot of like excellent consumer to producer relationship there. But the publishing industry is not that convenient. You're not just going to be able to show up to Penguin Random House and be like, here's a book you should buy, right? So that's where people like agents and managers come in. They have industry knowledge. they've been spending at least a good couple years in the industry, so they've built up solid relationships with people they can talk to, and they know who needs to hear what and how. Because a lot of us have very different communication styles, a lot of us have very different requirements and triggers when it comes to things, and your agent will be a very knowledgeable person about that. But then again, it's a good agent that can make or break your pitch. If you have a great agent, and there are some very great agents out there, they are going to improve your work, and that's their job, because you are their business partner in a sense, right? You pitch to them, they like the product you sold, so now the money they will receive comes directly from the work you do. So a good agent will respect that relationship, and they'll treat your investment accordingly. They will help you prepare your manuscripts and query letters, and they'll make you the most polished version of yourself you can be. So now it comes down to if you want an agent or not. Again, if you want an agent, great. I encourage it. I personally, on my own publishing journey, have reached out to agents as well, because I think that it can be a worthwhile investment if you find a good one. But it's a tricky process again. You need to find a good one. So how you're going to do that is think about what books you like, what industry you want to be in, what genre, what age group, and then I want you to really focus on that, because that will help you find agents that work in that niche. So, for example, I have a friend who's an agent. They are a phenomenal agent. They work in new adult romance. That's their bread and butter. I can't work with them as much as I would love to, because my content is usually YA and new adult science fiction. It's not real, like my content doesn't have a lot of romantic context. So you need to be aware of those relationships. So time as an agent, I need you to do research on those specific people. Figure out who their past clients are. Reach out to them. See what that relationship was like. Was it a positive experience? Do you find that they were helpful? Did they support you as a writer? Ask those questions, right? And then if you hear back things are going slow, all you need to do, things are going well, sorry. If things are going well, what you need to do is you need to actually reach out to that person and ask, are you accepting submissions? Yes, no, we'll change their answer. If they are accepting submissions, great. I wish you best of luck. Go forward with that. If they're not, ask them who you think they should talk to, right? Or who they think you would be a better fit for, essentially. Because word of mouth can go a really long way, right? And at the end of the day, if you have an agent, you need to remember one key thing, and that is, this is a business relationship. They get paid when you get paid. If someone's asking you for money for anything before that, no. If you're going to be signing contracts, be very thorough about it. Get legal advice, consult some other friends, because in the creative world, your intellectual property is everything. And if you sell it to the wrong person, or if you just stick your wagon to the wrong train, it's unfortunately going to be a very tough problem to fix going back, okay? And that can be that can be really scary for a lot of people, right? So if you're hearing all of this and you're like, no, I don't want an agent, I'm good, that's fine. You don't need an agent, honestly. Like I said, you can do this work yourself. It's just harder. So what are you going to need to do? Let's talk about it. If you are not going to have an agent or representation, you are your own brand, and you need to market yourself accordingly. The first thing you need to do for that is a query letter. Your query letter needs to be spot on. It needs to, like, the very first line needs to hook me. Let's say if you submit a manuscript at Entangled Publication, the publication I work with, if you submit something to them and I read your query letter and it doesn't hook me, I'm going to be very honest with you. I will likely have very little interest in actually reading the book. And those sort of mistakes happen fairly often. And those things are you either give me too much information about the book, you don't give me enough information about the book. It's very fine balance. You don't tell me important things like the word count. Always have a word count there, because that helps me know what is the length of the book, right? And you need to pay attention to the length of the book. Sidebar, real quick, because a lot of genres are like length specific. You'll find that a lot of new YA is only about like 50 to 75,000 words now. It's not longer than that. If you want to sell something that's like Game of Thrones level, like half space this thick, you're gonna have a tough run. All right, so you need to market yourself accordingly. And then the last thing you really need to include is let me know what is your target audience. Is this contemporary fiction? Is this science fiction? Is this a historical romance? Are you writing specifically for people of color, for queer folks, for disabled folks? We need to know this in the very first little bit, because that lets us know that you have an understanding of a manuscript. Quick question. So it looks like there is what does a manuscript look like if I'm writing a collection of short stories? Okay, so if you're writing a collection of short stories, you're going to want to pitch it as a novella series, right? Or something along that vein. And the reason you're going to do that is so that the agent or the editor that you're reaching out to is aware that it's not going to be 120 pages of one story. It's going to be a bunch of little stories. And I would suggest that you put your favorites at the front so that at least it hooks their attention. Because what can happen is if you have some stories but a lot of really good ones, you need to make sure the really good ones catch their attention. And then if you're signed with them, they will help with you to improve those stories and bring them all up to par. Hope that answers that question. All right. So the second part of the query letter that you really need to focus on is why you need to be the one writing. There are a million people out there. All of us have our individual experiences, but you can write anything if you have good enough imagination. So you need to tell people why you specifically need to be writing the story. And that brings us to things about like talking about your accomplishments. Are you, again, let's take the historical fiction example. Are you a history major? Do you have a degree in that? Are you a cultural specialist for whatever ethnicity, race, culture you're writing about? Are you an immigrant? Even that can count. Like if you're an immigrant and you grew up there and you grew up with those folks' stories or whatever you're trying to take inspiration from, it needs to go in there. If you're writing about disabled people, you need to talk about how you are the right person to talk about these stories. What experiences do you have with disability? What knowledge do you have about accessibility? Because these things are relevant, right? And that's sort of where I find the most interest when it comes to the writers I want to work with. Because I will actually go look up a writer to see what their other works look like. The last thing is pretty important, and this is honestly the thing a lot of people get wrong. And I'm going to be very honest, if you get this wrong, it could make or break your query letter, and that is your comparison. What are you comparing your book to? If you're writing a book about a magic school, that's wonderful. There's always a market for magic in education. If you compare it to Harry Potter, though, no, it's not going to work. Because Harry Potter is 1 in a million, a problematic book that people are now not a fan of for very valid reasons. But also, it shows that you're not conscious of what the current market trends are. And if you're going to be a writer and a successful one, you need to be aware of those trends. And I'm going to show you an example of this later on for a pitch I did for myself. But you need to show that you have a good understanding of what similarities your book has, because that gives us an idea of what your audience is and what we're looking at in terms of readership and profit, right? I'm just trying to think about what else. Oh, yes. Last thing. Always make sure that you attach 2 documents to your query letters. The first needs to be the first 5 chapters of your book, or the first 50 pages. Whatever is greater, I would do that. And then the second needs to be your full manuscript. And I'll tell you why you need to attach those two separate things. I'm not speaking for the industry as a whole, but at Entangled Publishing, I am required to read the first 50 pages. Regardless of whether I like it or not, I have to read the first 50 pages. And only then I can submit a report and tell them that, like, hey, maybe this isn't worth our investment, or maybe it is. I will only consider reading a full manuscript if I'm really interested in a book, because I have several other assignments that I need to cover. I have multiple reports I need to write. So if you can give me that little snippet, that's perfect. All right. And I'm going to say this as early as possible. Your first page needs to hook me. Because if it doesn't, not going to happen, unfortunately. I can't speak for others, but for myself, if the first page of that manuscript or the first chapter doesn't really hit, kind of ruins the flavor for the entire thing. All right. Okay. We got another question. I'm gonna take. Ooh, this actually works in with what we're talking about. It's okay. Don't worry. We can go to submission. Question: are there any open query fests, or is it? Do you need a query letter ready? Okay. So there are a lot of open query things. They happen regularly. If you check Pitch Wars, if you check Writers Group, you'll find them fairly often. And that's a great resource we're going to talk about later. But if you have a manuscript ready, you also need to have a query letter ready. I can't tell you, like, there is no other option really, because unless you have the industry connections where you can literally just be like, email someone, let's say at like Disney Publications, Disney Books, and be like, hey, this is the book I wrote. You should read it. It's not going to work. Or you need to have like the kind of internet following that makes people want to pay attention to you. And that takes a really large following, because we don't really pay attention that much to open, like if we're not actively seeking for a certain story. But if you want us to like just hand you a book deal, you need to be like major influencer level for us to even consider that, right? So that plays into this topic about open submissions, because all of these query fests, all of these open submissions, the places where you can actually pitch yourself, usually happen on social media. In my experience, specifically on Twitter, because Twitter can be a very powerful tool for you. All right. So let's talk about how you actually go about participating in these open submission challenges. Okay. So that is the example I was talking about book comparisons, correct? So this is a book I spent about 3 years writing, not even submitting for anything. I spent 3 years just writing the first book. And it is similar to Hogwarts. It is similar to, I want to say, I'm trying to come up off the top of my head. It's similar to the Poppy Wars, if you're thinking about it, right? But this was sent last year. So I needed to make sure that what I was submitting fit what people would be looking for. So what I did is I picked a book, All the Birds in the Sky, which is a very popular book that came out in 2016. Great story. I would highly recommend reading it. And then I picked a classic, The Stand by Stephen King. It is a great book about like apocalyptic futures and morality and humanity, but it's fairly old. But it has the longevity because, you know, it has an association with Stephen King. So that's what I was marketing myself as. And then I gave whoever was looking at my submission a brief intro of what the book would be about. I didn't give them like character names. I didn't give them any details about locations. I just told them that, like, hey, this book is going to be about the unfortunate people who are, you know, cursed or destined to end the world. We always have like a lot of things about you're going to be the hero, you're going to be the savior. What about the people who are, you know, at the flip side? They try and do their best, but unfortunately sometimes it doesn't work out in their favor. And it did well for me. I got a lot of great responses from that. And I would also personally a little bit attribute that to the visuals I used. I see a lot of times people will tweet without visuals. Visuals can really hold someone's attention. If you're a psych student, you already know this. If you are an arts person, you already know this. Pictures are worth 1,000 words because they hold our attention more than paragraphs do. So if you got something like artwork or some character designs that you worked on with a friend, put them in there, right? And speaking of like friends, you really need to have great literary friends and colleagues if you're going to work in this industry. Because those are the people you're going to turn to in a tough moment. Those are the people you're going to turn to when you need to celebrate. Without them, you're going to be floundering. And I want you to pay attention to this. If you follow like your favorite authors on Twitter, check their book posts about like, hey, I got onto the bestseller list, or my book just came out. Check the replies. You'll see other authors interacting with them and congratulating them because it forms a great community. And those other authors can help boost your book when it comes out. They can give you a leg up in terms of marketing. And they can also be a great source, like a resource for finding out editors and agents you should be working with. Speaking of which, follow like those agents, those editors, and publications on social media too. Because oftentimes they will give you more information as well. They will let you know that, hey, I'm looking for a book right now. I'm looking for this kind of book. Or if you send me something like this, I won't read it, versus if you send me something like this. They're going to give you examples, and that can really be helpful when you're trying to set yourself apart from the crowd by following these instructions and trying to tailor your approach to every person individually. It is a lot of work, but it is worth it if you're going to try and be a successful author long term. And the last major thing is follow hashtags. Own Voices, Pit Mad, Black Voices Matter. These hashtags were created specifically to encourage new writers and marginalized folks to get an opportunity. We don't always have the most access to the larger publication industry, right? If you grew up reading books, everyone heard about like how J.K. Rowling struggled, and how like this and that, but like she was a privileged woman. She still had a safety net. We might not have that. You might have, like, if you were a fan of the Aragon books, as I was as a kid, I learned fairly recently that his parents, Christopher Paolini's parents, created an imprint to publish his book for him. They had connections in the publishing industry. So I don't have that. I work in it, but I'm building those relationships now. If you also don't have those, you need to take every opportunity you can to show that you are a great author. Cast a huge net, reach as many people as possible, because they need to know about you. Whether they buy your book right now, they need to know about you so that they pay attention for every upcoming book. All right? Oh. Is it frozen? Looks frozen. Oh, there we go. So, is it just me? There we go. Okay. So you sent in your query letter, finished your manuscript, you got an agent, you didn't, whatever your path was. Now you gotta wait. It is what it is. You have to wait. Publishing is a game of numbers. You're gonna have to send out 1 million submissions. You're gonna have to like fishing analogy, you're gonna cast out your line and you're gonna see what you get. If you play Animal Crossing, you already know this. Sometimes you get a boot, sometimes you get a stone. You'll get one of those, I don't know, what's a common fish? I forget. What's that green one? Always comes up. Someone tell me. Can't remember. Y'all know. But like, it's gonna take a while before you get a shark. Or like an oarfish. Something valuable, right? It's gonna take time. So you just gotta keep at it. Don't get discouraged. I know it's tough. It takes time, but there is a market for your stories. Trust me. And it's worth following and being patient, because there's always someone out there who wants to read your work. It's just a matter of waiting long enough till they see it. And if you're good at following trends, even better, because you'll know who to sell what and when. Example. I made a typo in that presentation. If you're writing about lost princesses, a lost princess who has to team up with some poor person or a common person to save the world, it's your time right now. I can name 4 books off the top of my head right now that fit into that. You have Children of Blood and Bone, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, that series, the whole thing. It is what it is. You have a black, light-skinned princess working with a dark-skinned peasant. She's a magic user. They team up. They have to save the world. You have what is it? A Song of Wraith and Ruins. Same story. You have Kingdom of Gold, City of Brass. That whole thing with the author something Chakrabarti. Very similar stories. So if you need to follow those trends, right? And you need to be aware of what's happening. If you're working on, let's say, a book about a global pandemic, maybe not the best time to pitch that right now when everyone's very tired of the story, right? Maybe work on something else. Maybe work on not a global pandemic, but some sort of escapism story. Be aware of those things. All right, so that's honestly all you can do as a person trying to get published. And I'm going to tell you about what happens behind the scenes, okay? So you wrote this, you sent a hypothetical situation, you're doing this for me. You're sending in submissions to me right now. You got your agent, whoever did it, it's coming to me. Sent a query letter, great, I loved your query letter, gave me all the information I needed. You gave me great examples. You did not mention Harry Potter. You did not mention Harry Potter. And you did a solid job hooking me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate if your story aligns with our brand. So if I'm taking it in the scenario of Entangled Publishing, Entangled does a lot of romance. So usually we like to have some sort of romantic element in there. And if it's not there, it's going to be a harder sell, but not impossible. So I need to see what else is there. And if it ideally aligns with the brand, I'm going to do a full reader's report on it for my managing editor, right? And that's an example of the sort of questions I have to answer in my reader's reports, right? You have the title, you have the author's name, their agent. There's usually an imprint. Every major publication has some sort of imprint where they'll specialize in either very sexual content, paranormal content. It could be sweet and for teens. It could be historical fiction. Whatever it is, we will categorize it so that we know what the market is, right? And then we'll move on from there. Is there any sort of romantic element to it? What genres does it appeal to? Who would be the customer base for it? And that's not going to be off the examples you list. It'll be off of what I read. So you could say that it's great for, let's say, new book that just came out that you should check out, These Violent Delights. You could say it's for These Violent Delights, but I, based on my readings, will be, I don't really feel like this is These Violent Delights. I feel like this more aligns with Wicked Spirits or Wicked Foxes, another novel by an Asian author, right? So that'll be based on my report. And then I'm going to go into more detail. I'm going to talk about the tone, the pacing, the voice, how the characters are written. A lot of times, new authors don't have the most developed characters, and that can be a tough sell. Because you can fix some tone issues, you can fix some pacing, but recreating your character takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and it's not worth the effort, right? If you have a romantic conflict, come talk about it, what happened, why is there trouble in paradise, star-crossed lovers, feuding families, hate enemies to lovers, whatever it is. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about your plot conflicts. And all of that shit, am I allowed to cuss? All of that stuff comes from the first 50 pages, all right? And then if you're writing something that is more sexual or has a lot of triggering content, we will specify that because there are agents and editors who elect not to work with those sort of topics. I personally choose not to work with things that deal with police violence and military. it's a sensitive issue, like it's a sensitive topic. I don't like to engage in it, right? So when a submission comes in, our system will scan for that and they won't assign those pieces. So I'll do the same thing. If it's a very sexual book, there's a lot of talk about fetishes and kinks. We will specify, just be like, hey, this is like heat level nuclear. If you're not okay with that, we're not gonna send it to that particular editor, right? And based on all of that information, we're gonna give you a response. Accepted, rejected, or the less likely is revise and resubmit, because that usually means that we saw a lot of potential, but it's just not there, and we don't have the time to invest in fixing it for you. And we try our level best to always offer a lot of feedback with our responses, whether it's an accepted or rejected. We're going to tell you that you did these things great, or you did these things poorly, how to improve, best of luck on your future endeavors, or you did these things great, that's why we want to work with you, right? So that's what happens behind the scenes. And just like I spent a lot of time talking about it, it takes even longer to make it happen. Between something being submitted, it being assigned to me reviewing it, me sending it back, managing editor reviewing it, them seeing if it's worth pursuing or not based on my opinion, they might assign to another editorial assistant who will give their own opinion on it. Very long process. It can take anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks. Very honestly, it's very arduous because there's a lot of steps involved. And that can be like time consuming. That can be stressful if you're trying to get your book out there as soon as possible because you're excited about it, right? Ooh, wait, question. Do you recommend writing short stories and essays on social media while you're waiting to hear back from publishers? Could that help your pitch? Being a writer publicly will always help your work. If you've got a Medium, a WordPress, a Wix, a Squarespace, whatever discount code you got from a YouTuber, if it's out there, it will help, because that is more proof that you are showing that you are consistently able to complete tasks and projects, that you are not a risky investment, that you can complete things, you're able to give a variety of content, that it's accessible and interesting. And best part, that thing, having those essays and short stories and articles out there, they build a base for you, which is the second point right there. You need to learn how to market yourself, and that's a great tool for that. The more people that know about you, the more customers you already have, the more readers that care about your content, and the more people will take notice of you. I got my job at Entangled Publishing because I connected with an editor there, and she saw my work, and she realized that I have a very strong voice when it comes to talking about culture, politics, and sexuality. So she thought I would be a good fit, and she recommended me for a position, right? So similarly, even though Entangled Publishing likely won't be the place I write for, like I write a book for, it's a great step for me to make those connections. And by having that access, I also get better information about the market that I'm trying to get into, right? Similarly, you need to do the same with the existing customer base you have. Take some marketing classes if you need to, join masterclass, join Skillshare, take a college course, whatever you need to do. Figure out how to keep people intrigued and show them that they should care. Because marketing a book is very difficult. I'm going to tell you that right now. Adults don't have scholastic fairs. You're not just going to walk in randomly and pick up a book that you've never heard of. You're likely going to hear about it from a book blogger or a booktuber or a bookstagram. There's a lot of book stuff out there. You're going to hear about it from a friend. You're going to hear about it from a listicle. And that's how you also need to learn how to market yourself. If you're writing short stories, submit them to things. Ask people to review your short stories. There are organizations like my own. Off Color does that. We pretty often review books. We will interview authors. If you're familiar with the book series, the Poppy Wars, we just interviewed the author of the series, Rebecca Kwong, right? So those things get you more attention, and they also help build your network. Going back to the first point, you see that transition? So smooth. Because the more you talk to people, the more you find readers for yourself, the more other writers take notice of you, the more editors that take notice of you. You build a network. You're going to find writer friends, you're going to find editors, you're going to find literary agents, you're going to find sensitivity readers. There's a whole industry out there that you might not be aware of. There are people that are designated to just fixing your book and making it slightly better. So make those connections so that they can help you. Ooh, all right, okay. Question, very important one. Hearing all of this already exhausts me. I feel so defeated, I don't even want to begin. Advice. Tough love moment, you need to care, otherwise no one else will. If you are passionate about your book, if you are passionate about representation, about literature, about YA, about science fiction, whatever it is, you need to be the first person to care about that. You don't need to do it in a day or a year. Like I said, I have spent forever writing books. I've spent forever writing articles. I write like movie reviews. Sometimes it takes me weeks to write those. You just have to get it done because it matters to you. Because that love and effort and time and patience you put into that, it will yield something beautiful, right? Everyone, like, I have a friend, she recently published 3 books this year. Follow her, she's an amazing children's writer, Preeti Chibar. I will, like, if you follow me on Twitter, which you should, I will show you her books, right? Phenomenal writer. I've known her for about 2 years. When she published her 3 books this year, I was like, how did you do this? 3 books in a year, that's amazing. And then she made a thread talking about how this was 10 years of work. She spent a decade on these 3 books, building connections, writing stories, writing articles, pitching herself, speaking at engagements, and it yielded 3 amazing books. And now she's working pretty regularly with Disney. She's writing Marvel stories. She just wrote a children's book about Yoda. It takes a long time and a lot of work to become an overnight success because they don't notice you until you are a success. All right? So I know you're tired. I know it's exhausting. I want you to take a rest. I want you to eat, drink some water, drink iced coffee, whatever it is. But I need you to care so that we can see the amount of effort and patience that went into your work so that we can take part of that. All right? Okay, I'm gonna focus off the slides, but I'm gonna finish this question. I'm just gonna finish this one last bit of the slide, and then I'll go on to the question. Last thing is be smart. Writing doesn't pay a lot. If you're a person of color, even less. If you are disabled, even less. If you're a queer person, even less. If you are an amalgamation of all 3, it's tough. Not everyone becomes Rick Riordan. Not everyone gets Maya Angelou status. Not all of us become Rebecca R.F. Kwong with her burning book, like her burning dragon suit. It's tough out here. And you don't get paid a lot. Even if you get paid, let's say like 10 grand for a book, they won't give you 10 grand up front. They'll give you a little bit when they sign you. They'll give you a little bit when you deliver a draft, the final draft, and then you get a little bit at the very end. That's 10 grand. And if you do the math on that, that's less than minimum wage. So you need to be smart about how you spend that money. And you need to be smart about what jobs you're doing while you're writing, right? So I would say save, be smart. Because the only way you're gonna get more book deals is if you are smart about your time and energy. Because you don't earn royalties, even on published books, until you've earned enough money to cover your initial advance. And that can be different for different people. There's a whole like math system to that. We can talk about that on whatever the social platform if you're interested or if you have questions about it, right? So that's the end of my presentation. Going back to this question. It's a very good question. The question is, if I have a finished manuscript, but I'm not ready to pitch it, how would I find a sensitivity reader before I start querying it? The internet. The internet is your friend. Not always, but it can be a great friend. If I need a sensitivity reader for anything, I will just tweet, hey, does anyone know a sensitivity reader for wheelchair user, like user related accessibility questions, struggles, whatever it could be. Does anyone have a sensitivity reader for queer women of color? Do you have a sensitivity, like, does anyone know a sensitivity reader for deaf and hard of hearing folks and accessibility? Be specific and just put it out into the universe. Someone's going to answer, trust me. Or you could just Google it, right? Someone's talking about finances. It's a whole thing, trust me. Finances are a rough journey if you're going to be a creative. All right, so sensitivity reader, just Google someone. You're always going to find someone. If you are still struggling, follow me on Twitter, DM me, and I'll send you some recommendations. I have a lot of friends who work as sensitivity readers. All right, what's the other question? Oh, yes, and that is my IG and my Twitter and my TikTok and everything, because I have a brand. I have a brand, y'all. Paid attention, didn't I? Any other questions? Just gonna sip this water because I've been talking. Okay. Can I expand on finances? Absolutely. My least favorite and most important topic to talk about. Money, unfortunately, runs the world. So you need to be smart about how you invest, how you save, how you spend. As a writer, and if you want some more like actual hard numbers, Google the tag publishing paid me, and you'll get some more information. It's tough out here. You can get anywhere from like $3 grand to $100 grand for a book, right? And the way they will dispense that money to you is in chunks. So, for example, let's say you're a first-time author, you were given an advance of $20,000. They give you 10 grand up front. You essentially have those 10 grand to write the entire book. No way. I think I'm getting more questions. Okay. I will cover that later. Finances first. So you basically get those 10 grand to write the entire book, right? Let's do the math, because I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I'm gonna just pull up my phone. We got 10 grand. There are 52 weeks in a year, and there are 40 hours in a work week. That is, you got paid $4.80 an hour for writing an entire year, essentially. Not a lot, so be smart with your money. If you're a writer and you want to pursue writing full time, I would suggest reducing your expenses as much as realistically possible. If you can move in with family, move in with family. If you have friends that can give you low income housing, go to there. Always keep a job. Always keep a job, whether you're freelancing, whether it's a 9 to 5, have a safety net in place for yourself, right? And I would be smart about how you spend that advance. I would put it aside for something big, because even if you were given an advance of only $10,000, even if you get, let's say, like in royalties, you get like 50 cents per book, right? To even break even on that 50 cents, you would need to sell 20,000 books. You would need to sell 20,000 books before you would even see a penny from royalties. If you got, like, again, hypothetical situation. So I would really suggest, like, speaking to a financial advisor, speaking to your most financially literate sense, right? Friend, whatever you got to do, just be smart about it. Doesn't mean you need to live like a pauper. No one's asking you to cut out Starbucks. This isn't a Business Insider advertisement. Ooh, yes, please go ahead. You can make me full screen. This is like, I'm not going to tell you to give up avocados. That's not realistic. That's not true either. Expenses are real. I'm just saying be smart. All right. One question from Kathy Hong, I believe. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. Kathy says that writers of color must write. I'm assuming must write their stories of racial trauma, but for far too long, our stories have been shaped by white imagination. Right? Publishers expect authors to privatize and commodify their trauma, and in exceptional family or historic tragedies test the character. Blah blah blah. You're right. You're absolutely right. We live in a very colonial world to date. Publishing is white. People want to hear white stories. Um, my only comment about that is that we are not a monolith. None of us are a monolith. I am not even a monolith. I don't even represent all trans femme Indian women with disabilities. I'm not a representation of us all. I tell stories that I can speak to. So what you need to do for yourself is the same thing. You can't take on that pressure to write for everyone, and you need to write what is comfortable for you. If you're okay talking about racial trauma, I support you. If you're not okay talking about racial trauma, I support you. You just need to make sure that what you put out into the universe is something you can live with. Okay? And if you're interested in writing memoirs and fiction, screw white comfort. There you go. Screw white comfort. Honestly, say what you need to say. Like in her book, The Burning Gods, Rebecca F. Kuang talks about like the colonization of China, Japanese imperialism, Western imperialism, like very graphic details about it. And they're taken from live accounts, right? It's very tough to read and it can be uncomfortable at times, but it needs to be done. So I say you need to do what you need to do, right? Question, do you have any agents or imprints that you recommend for A B to pitch to? No, I don't. I can never give you a blanket statement like that because the content you write needs to be it has to go to the right person. I could say you can submit it to me, but doesn't necessarily mean that I would be the best person to help you with that story, right? That's why I say like having a network, creating connections where people know about what type of content you're writing, that can make or break your story. Next question, what are the pros and cons of self-publishing? Pros, you have a lot of creative freedom. The book goes out how you want it. It sells for whatever you think is a fair value. And I've supported a lot of people that are self-published. One of my closest friends on Twitter, she published a story called Living Heroes. Phenomenal comic series. Highly recommend checking it out if she has any left. She did it herself. She crowdfunded, sold a bunch of copies. The only thing is, with self-publishing, it's a lot less money to be made. And it doesn't always reach the same audience. And that's an unfortunate reality because if you have, let's say, one of the big five publishers, Disney, Penguin, Simon Schuster, Macmillan, who else is there? There's one other. They're gonna put a lot more dollars into promoting your book, so you'll get more sales there, right? Second question: what are the pros? Oh, sorry, I already read that one. Okay, we have question: is LinkedIn a good resource for connecting with publishers and agents? It depends on what context. I'm not very comfortable with traditional networking. I have a LinkedIn, don't really use it. I don't feel comfortable just like messaging someone on LinkedIn being like, hey, do you want to talk about a business opportunity? I prefer to make a little bit more of an informal connection, usually on Twitter, Instagram. And if I see that they're interested in some business opportunities, I will reach out to them specifically about those. And I'll talk to them about like, hey, I noticed that you were talking about looking for children's books for Asian authors writing children's books. I have this concept. Do you think it fits with your brand? And do you know someone I can talk to? Right? So I would like, it can be a good resource if you're good at traditional networking. Second question. Question to piggyback off of Kathy: can we just write happy endings? What pitfalls would Asian American Pacific Islanders should they look out for in the industry? You can write a happy ending. Who says you can't? It can be beautiful. One of the most moving stories I read this year came from an Asian author. Her name, let me pull up the book because I have terrible memory issues. Come on, come on, come on. It is a wonderful story about a kitsune and a samurai and a ninja. It is quite friendly. It is beautiful. Julie Kagawa. There we go. All three of these books, beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful happy ending. The lead and her love interest find connection after everything. It made me cry. You can write it. All right. The pitfalls are if you find someone is trying to stereotype, like to orientalize your story or make it a little too mystical or like push you into something you're not comfortable with, avoid it. At the end of the day, your creative project is your baby, and I would not put it out into the universe unless you're satisfied with it. All right, do we have any other questions? Because we're getting close to the end, y'all. Ooh, let's talk about Off Color. Yes, self promo. So, Off Color is a nonprofit based in Canada. I work on it with a wonderful staff of people around the globe. We have one of our directors is in Singapore. The other is a Nigerian British woman in, I believe, London, because I don't know anywhere else in England. So we work on that together, and it is a all-female, all-queer, mostly queer board of directors. We have Asians in director positions. We have Black folks in director positions. We have Indigenous folks. We talk about movies, media, politics. Occasionally, we'll talk about some wellness content. And we basically talk about anything related to being a person of color around the world. If it's a movie about us, we'll talk about it. If it is excluding us, we'll talk about it. If it is bad, we'll talk about it. If it's great, we'll talk about it. If it's from us or about us, we are here for it. And the reason we exist is because we want to make sure that we get to tell our own stories, that we have an adequate voice. Because we don't need white people being the voice for the voiceless. We can speak. And if we can't speak, we can sign. Sign language is also there. Accessibility can be created, okay? That is why we're here. And I, on the side of being the editor-in-chief of Off Color, I do that in my professional life. I work as a creative consultant. I help authors fix their books. I help photographers create their sets and everything. I help screenwriters find producers and casts. I work in publishing. I read tarot. That's a whole separate workshop that's happening on Wednesday. You need to watch that if you're into spirituality, into religion. If you are trying to figure out what your path is with wellness, join that on Wednesday. All right, it's a lot happening out here. I need to update my website because I forgot, but we're making it happen. All right, that's all I got. Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all. It was a pleasure talking to you. Y'all should check out Off Color. Follow me everywhere. Get me to 15,000 on Twitter because social media unfortunately runs my life. Really appreciate y'all. Have a fantastic night.
All right, thank you, KESHAV, for all the insight for workshop. Please follow her on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all platforms, and check out her website, offcolor.org. Also, just if you're tuning in on YouTube, please subscribe, as well as our Facebook Marketplace. Please check that out as well to look for more information on our vendors and other workshops, and starrynightartsfest.com. Please check that out to sign up for our next workshops as well. There will be another workshop tonight after this. Thank you, KESHAV, again for your time and your wonderful wisdom. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Can't wait to see you, 'cause cause I don't know what's in store. It's the kindness in your heart makes me keep wanting more. Thousands of miles apart, doesn't matter cause you're at heart. And when I look at you, what a work of art. Brings me tears at the start. So don't go away, I need you to stay. Don't you run away from me. Don't go away, I need you to stay. Don't you run away from me.